and welcome to episode 94 of the podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about some heat loss and why is it important, the history of the heating system as we know it, and the one-pipe heating system. This and some more in this week's episode, but first of all, here's my friend Sean to tell you a bit more about the podcast. Are you a new person coming into plumbing and heating? Are you a homeowner that likes a bit of DIY? Or are you a business owner and wanted a bit more knowledge before you make some decisions on your plumbing and heating? Stay tuned to the podcast and hopefully we'll be able to help you out with some of your questions. And welcome back, and thank you very much indeed for listening, guys. We're on episode 94, so we're fast approaching the 100th episode. And we've got some plans in motion here to really celebrate the victory of pushing through for all these episodes that we've been doing for you guys every single week. And hopefully some people out there have found some value in it as well. So the first topic we're going to talk about is heat loss. So I've brushed upon different subjects, the same subject, but in a few different ways over the course of the podcast that I've been doing. But I just want to go through it again, really. So we're at mid-February at the moment, and we're still getting those sort of really cold single-digit evenings. So just to explain to you guys that heat loss is the amount of energy that you need to maintain the set temperature in a room area or of your building. So if you've got a lot of heat loss within the room and you want to maintain that, say, at 20 degrees, just for round numbers' sake, and you're going to need to put in, say, 5 kilowatts of energy into that room because the heat loss is so bad, just to maintain that just to try and maintain the temperature. You know, if you've got an open fireplace, really drafty floors, really drafty windows, you haven't got a loft hatch, anything that sort of thing, you need to put so much energy into the area just to try and maintain that temperature of heat. And as soon as that heat disappears, the temperature starts to plummet. And that's what we basically call heat loss. So the lower the amount of heat loss we can have, the less energy that you need to put into it from your underfloor heating, your radiators, your log burn, your electric heaters, whatever it is. So I've got some tips really. So to try and reduce the amount of heat that you're losing or heat loss. So about 25% of the heat that we have that is lost in our buildings is actually through the loft, because heat rises, as we know, and it just wants to go to the tallest and the highest part of the building. So loft insulation is really, really important, and they recommend a minimum depth, an uncrushed minimum depth of 270 millimeters thick. That's like nearly 300 mil, 12 inches. So that's quite a thick amount. So that would be more than the timbers. So if you have the original insulation that was just laid out and probably about 4 inches thick, about 100 mil between the timbers back in the old days, where you can still see the tops of the wood, that is going to be undersized, and you need to do some more. And typically what they'll do is they'll go between the joists and then go like a crisscross lattice across that. And it's really important that we don't crush that down as well, because that sort of hinders the design aspect of like the rock wall insulation. So about 270 mil is recommended. So if you don't have that, there may be a grant that there were bundling grants around a few years ago to get lofts insulated. So you might be worth contacting your local loft installation company that may still be able to access lofts. So access the grant, for you, so we can get that insulated. Another way we can lose heat, obviously as it rises through, we mentioned it earlier, is the loft hatch. And people will just have like a piece of ply into the loft hatch, and then it will just sit down under its own weight. It might have a bit of a twist in it. So if we can try and insulate the back of that timber with a bit of with a bit of insulation, like a Celotex type material. So we insulate the back of it. Then we put some draft excluders around the bit that it sits on, like the stop beads that go round. And then what we then do is we put some little catches on there. And the idea is that we put the catches on it nice and tight, so it pulls it down onto the seal. So it just, any little tiny gaps, we're just really trying to minimize for the amount of heat that we're just going to start creeping through. We won't get it perfect, but we're just trying to do the best that we absolutely can. So windows and doors. So yeah, we've had it over the decades of the Everest double glazing adverts with the feather as it was falling down on a drafty Scottish Highland or wherever it was back in the day. But actually, we do lose a lot. It's called U value. So when you got your wall, whether it's single thickness or whether it's got a cavity wall insulation in between, well, if you've got there, that has a U value. An insulation value, and glass has always struggled because the big pieces of glass may only have a gap on them. So if you've got double glazing, you might have a 25mm gap, but the glass itself is a very poor insulator, and we lose a lot of heat through windows. So but we can't help that because we want the light to come in. We don't want to be living in caves. But around the openings of the windows and in the corners and stuff, we might be getting drafts. So we can then start looking at maybe replacing the seals on the on the openings. Maybe around the window, there's a gap in the silicone, and we're getting a draft coming through, and we can feel it. If that's happening, we can get that resealed in to try and stop those drafts that are coming through. So we'd lose a lot through windows and doors. Do you remember the old sausages that your nanny used to have down by the door on the floor to stop the draft coming across? They are actually an important thing, and they do actually work. So that sort of thing on the windows, on your doors. I've seen these ones where they've got like two little sausages and a little flat bit, and it goes under a door so the door can sort of open and close, and it goes with it. Those sort of things, they can all help. The drafts coming from a cooler area into a warm area. So those sort of things there. And another little thing that was when I was looking it up was about at dusk when the temperature starts to drop outside, when we're losing the radiant heat from the sun. Actually, draw your curtains at that point, because nice thick heavy curtains will actually stop the heat. Will slow down the heat being lost through the window, because the temperature between the outside and the inside starts to increase as the temperature outside drops. So it has more of a pull through the window, through the glass of the energy coming outside. So radiators. So obviously we're a plumbing and heating podcast, but make sure they're bled. Make sure you've got the air out of them. Make sure the system's is clean. We're not all fully sludged up. That will cost you money, not just in boiler repairs, but inefficiencies as well. Make sure the furniture is away from the front of the radiators. So, the radiators at the front, by the very nature, they're called radiants. So they radiate heat forwards. So if we go and put a settee up close to them, or your bed, or whatever it'll be, we're actually losing that heat because it wants to come out and rise up from the radiator. And it creates this swirl effect from the top, then it comes into the bottom and pulls through. So we want to try and make that as spacious as we can to be as efficient by its own design. Make sure your TRVs are working okay. So sometimes when they don't work, people will take them off, or they're a bit cold, so they take them off. Obviously these are temperature limiting devices. So from an efficiency point of view, what we don't want to do is overheat areas, open doors, open windows, because this area is really hot and that area is really cold. We sort of lose efficiencies there. So just make sure they're working okay. So there's some tips for you on your rads for that side. Open fireplaces. So open fires. So they're around 10 to 20% efficient, and it's really only the infrared heat that comes forwards from the glow of the flame that we actually get. But when a fire starts heating up the chimney as it's going through, the draw or the pull of the warm chimney absolutely increases. So what that'll actually do, you may feel warmer because we're getting this glow off the energy coming through, but actually it's a massive draw of warm air from the rest of the property that's being pulled in through the door, under the door, if the door's open, and then being blasted up the chimney. So it actually, the rest of the house massively cools down as you've got your fire on and it's pulling it through. So it's probably less than 10 to 20% efficient when you start looking at the overall heat loss of the property. And so, we lose a lot of heat up the chimneys, and that's why birds sit on TV aerials, not where your fires are. And I'll tell you that for free, because it'll be hot up there. I've been up on a chimney when they've had a fire going, and it is very warm. It's too warm, actually. You can't hold onto the chimney box, you burn your fingers. So what I would say is, like, if you're refurbing your house, you're going room by room, doing some decoration and some improvements on it. I'll suggest in there about, insulating the pipes under your floors. There's always been a bit of a myth of, actually, if it's between two rooms of the floors, the pipes don't need to be insulated. Well, you can see why, because it's saying that it's actually still heating the envelope of the property. But the problem you've got is that you want to put in 1 kilowatt of energy, 2 kilowatts of energy into that space there, but you're losing maybe 200, 300, 400 watts of energy when it's going through a void in a space which is between the carpets, which is then between the floorboards, which is then got a carpet over the top. So you're not really getting that efficiency of the energy being used correctly. So if you are doing some works and you are refurbing some rooms, then I'd highly recommend that. And if you are taking the floors up, try and get it insulated between the floors as well. So any floor, if you've got some traditional floorboards, get them insulated. And then that will then help the heat loss travelling from one space to another. And if you're like my house, where you've got a massive void with air bricks underneath, you want to get it insulated between the timbers and then get it potentially or overboarded underneath the underlay of the carpet. And they do different sort of thermal underlays these days and better carpets to help with the drafts that may be drawing up and through if you're not able to achieve that. So also little gaps, if you've got two floors coming to, you've got those little threshold boards, you might have a little gap in the corner. You might want to get those filled in. Even with a bit of simple silicone may help do that as well. So that's the some little tips on some heat loss there for you guys. So the history section of the podcast. So the first heating system used hot water in a pipe. Hot water in a pipe, and it then took it round to a heating system into many different rooms, and it was by a Scottish engineer called William Strutt around the 1790s. The boiler was coal-fired and used iron pipes, and it managed to distribute it round to different rooms as part of his experiment. So the gravity circulated in the boiler. So the gravity boiler was actually in the cellar. And this enabled the heat to rise through, and then the less dense hot water would rise and then through the system, and then the cooler water as the energy was being dispersed into the room via the emitters like the radiators and the pipework, it would then drop back down and create this circulation effect of the water, and then that's what we call the gravity heating system, which was non-pumped back in the day. In the early 19th century, cast iron sectional radiators were developed. We would now call these like high water volume radiators, so like the old school radiators where they're absolutely massive in size. They were installed in public buildings, churches and in stately homes. So after World War II, mass house building started, obviously after all the bombing that would happen, certainly here in the southeast. And we would then have sort of coal-fired back boilers where you'd physically shovel coal in, and then that would then run your heating system. And that was then, once again, that was done on a gravity system, very similar to the William Strutt version. So the boiler would be in the back where your your old fuel, solid fuel fire would have been in your front room. And then your heat would then sort of distribute. And they're normally on quite large pipework as well, just to enable this slow moving of heat to come through. So, I wouldn't want to guess actually how long that would have taken for that sort of rooms to start heating up. These days we're looking at 30 minutes, 45 minutes to start heating a house up from cold on a pumped heating system. So I dread to think back in those days how long that would have took. And in 1966, saw the gas Baxi Bermuda back boiler started to be rolled out. So it was the back boiler with the gas radiant fire on the front, because we were so used to having gas fires. When they created the back boiler, they was like, we still need to put a fire on the front of this, because the adoption of this new technology with the gas infrastructure being put in, it's not really going to take on. So that's when what you started to do. So, the benefits of that, you didn't have to worry about having coal deliveries or failed coal deliveries. So that was a massive sort of downturn in the coal industry, certainly back in the day when they used to drop it off by horse and cart as well. And then the kids used to chase the horse and carts down the road, picking up the dropped off coal and taking it home, because the poverty was absolutely amazing back then. So in the early days, we had a one pipe heating system. So the benefits of that, it used less material. We only had to run one pipe all the way around, but it had to be in a larger diameter to get the energy to move through. Even when we started using pumps in the early 70s. If you've got a heating system at home and you look at it and you've got one pipe and you've got two T's that come off of the one pipe into a radiator at different heights, that's when you've got a bit of an idea, actually, you've got a one pipe heating system. So it was more problematic for sludge. Even when you was pumping it through, the distribution of heat was terrible. The first radiators were really, really hot. You had higher temps, and the last of the radiators where the energy had been sort of distributed, being sort of taken out, was sort of really cold and sort of just warm. And they had different sort of T's to come through and different sort of valves you could put on there to try and increase the efficiencies of it. And TRVs actually cause loads of problems with one pipe heating systems. And because it's all moving through and the way it goes, actually it's a very sludgy system. So it's not that great. So if you do have that in your home, highly recommend repiping your heating system and upgrading it to a two pipe system with modern copper pipes, and that will then give you so much more efficiencies in your system. So with TRVs, what this can do, causes loop pressure issues. So you get a lot of pressure changes because the valves will open and close and shut that radiator off, which will then put more pressure down to the system, down to the next radiator. And by design, these systems would have been, you'd have had the pipe coming through and increased and decreased on the whole system to try and balance the heating system out. And we would then start doing this, we then start getting the other radiators overheating in different spaces. So when we turn up to do a boiler change and we see that we've got a one pipe heating system, we strongly recommend to all our clients that we actually upgrade the system. If they're not in a position where they can do it, can't afford it, then we'll actually install the boiler, but we won't actually fit the TRVs to the system. And there are some ways we can do it with close couple T's and stuff. So we actually create like a mini low loss header onto the system, so the boiler can do what it does, and then the heating system can do what it does on separate pumps. And that's the most efficient way, really, of running a modern boiler onto a one pipe heating system. So yeah, in modern times now, 2026, there's no place for it really. With all the efficiencies, we're trying to decrease the temperatures of heating systems to try and get as much efficiency out of them as we can. So that concludes this week's episode of the podcast. I hope that was some real value to you guys. If you know anybody else that could actually benefit from listening to our podcast and being one of our faithful subscribers, please can you share it with just one person? That will mean a big help to us and a big thank you. It really does help the algorithm when we start getting it spreaded across. I don't quite know how it all works, but it's like an internet thing, how it all happens. So we're in big preparations for the 100th anniversary celebration of the podcast. So we're getting all that done and dusted. If you have any questions about the podcast, email us at podcast@gaslec.net. And if we can help with any plumbing or heating issues within your domestic or commercial sectors, then email us at office@gaslec.net. Have a fantastic week, guys. All the best and goodbye.